I mean, you make a very good point actually, because I think both of us at different times in our lives have been UNPs. We've been UNP supporters, like real hardcore UNP supporters. And to finally see after all this time, a UNP president, Ranil Wickremesinghe himself becoming the president of the country, instead of being overjoyed and having this moment as these people that used to really are Kapua Kola people, we don't have that. Instead, it's we find that he's aligned himself with the most ultra-nationalist party that we've had in recent memory, and that's quite a strange dynamic. And I also want to just ask you about the in the early 1990s, there was a contention when Ranasinghe Premadasa was essentially out. He was the first national level leader that the country had. That's from outside the political elite, the established elite. Some even mention the caste, even though we should not even be talking about that in the 21st century in 2022. But these were things that were discussed in the 90s, that were openly alluded to. And there were even impeachment proceedings brought by Gamini Desanayake and Lalitha Athuratmudali against President Ranasinghe Premadasa. So do you see a similar dynamic happening in the UNP, or that's happened in the UNP, whereby the established order of Ranil Wickremesinghe, etc., were just simply not willing to allow a new establishment through Mr. Sajid Premadasa to enter the UNP?
I think that's a very good and pertinent question you asked. When you look at history, this happened in the late 80s. This is when this problem started happening. In the late 80s, I think 1988, when President Ranasinghe Premadasa was given nominations to contest presidency, he didn't get it on a platter. Even though he was the Prime Minister, even though he was the only deputy leader at that time of the UMP, Mr. Jayawardena had a lot of pressure from Lalitha Athuratmudali and Gamini Desanayake not to give this to President Premadasa. And that's when you see the difference between J.R. Jayawardena and Ranil Wickremesinghe. I mean, yes, I blame J.R. Jayawardena for a lot of things that have gone wrong in this country. But I also want to reiterate how he acted in that circumstance. What he did was, he consulted his General Secretary, Ranjan Wijeratne, who was one of his most trusted lieutenants, and who was not even very close to President Premadasa at the time, but he was more or less a JR appointee, bought right from the national list, chairman of the party, General Secretary of the party, Defence Minister. And he asked Mr. General Wijeratne, to do a survey, all island, to find out what the pulse of the people is. And he wanted the report done in about a week or two. So Mr. Wijeratne, he gave a detailed report. Now at that time, the splinter group that didn't want Mr. Premadasa thought that Ranjan, being part of the establishment, will give a report beneficial to Gamini Desanayake and Lalitha Athuratmudali. That report, very interestingly, the content of it was that the pulse of the people is with President Premadasa, Prime Minister Premadasa, that he is being perceived as someone from the working class who can rejuvenate the UMP and can bring the UMP on track. And guess what President Premadasa did? President Premadasa based his decision on that public report. And nominations to President Premadasa at that time were signed by the General Secretary Ranjan Wijeratne, who was pro-establishment back in the day, right? Who was from a affluent family, who had connections with the Sena Nayakas, who was a planter. At that time, planters were given to people from distinguished families, and that's how it, I'm not saying that's right, but that's how it was then. And that's how it happened. But since the time that happened, the splinter group in the UMP did not want to accept President Premadasa, which is why they opted for that no confidence motion, the impeachment, which is why they formed the DNF and suffered a humiliating defeat. And for me, history repeats, because isn't that the same thing what happened to Sajid Premadasa? Right. Sajid Premadasa was deputy leader to J.R. Jayawardena's nephew Ranil Wickremesinghe. Sajid Premadasa could have been the presidential candidate. However, unlike J.R. Jayawardena, President Ranil Wickremesinghe completely opted to sideline Sajid Premadasa, expelled a few of his members, and didn't give him the presidency. But President J.R. Jayawardena did not do that. He went by the pulse of the people. So, and like the DUNF suffered a humiliating defeat, the UNP suffered a humiliating defeat at the last elections, at the last general elections. And that's why I say history always repeats.
Yeah.
But at that time, I think J.R. Jayawardena did the best move that he could have made by appointing President Premadasa. And Kusum, one more thing, do you know the 1983 riots? One of the main contention points, what really annoyed the Sinhalese, was that President J.R. Jayawardena did a mass burial of the soldiers that were killed in Colombo.
Yes.
But do you know someone who advised against it? Someone who told President Jayawardena not to bring them to Colombo, that it will cause tension, was none other than Ranasinghe Premadasa. It was Ranasinghe Premadasa at that time who told President Premadasa that bringing these bodies to Colombo is going to cause what popularly was known later as the Black July riots. But President Premadasa did agree, President J.R. Jayawardena agreed that he is not going to do it. But there was a minister at the time, I think Tissa, can't really remember his name, something to do with, not Tissa Vitana, but some Tissa, a very famous UNP politician. He said to President J.R. Jayawardena that this is a three-pronged attack. One is coming from the south with the JVP uprising, one is going to be from the north, and one is going to be from your own party. So then President J.R. Jayawardena made the untimely decision of burying those bodies in Colombo and making a huge spectacle out of it. So people who call President Premadasa a racist fails to understand that he was one of the first people who told President Jayawardena not to do it, not to bring those bodies to Colombo.